The EFINA Podcasts.
Welcome to the EFINA Podcasts. This is episode 7, and my name is Emezino Afigbe. I'm the lead of the Gender Center of Excellence at EFINA, Enhancing Financial Inclusion and Advancement. We're very happy to have you join us for this particular episode, which follows on from the previous episode 6. We are still looking at product design, but this time we're looking at designing for her, gender intentional product design. And of course, with the EFINA podcast series, we are focused on looking at financial inclusion advancements and solutions that will ensure that every single Nigerian has access to bespoke and beneficial financial services, exactly what they need. And of course, off the back of International Women's Month, we'll be looking at a critical segment, which is women, to ensure that they have the solutions they need. We're talking about 51% of Nigeria's population of adult persons being women, and that's 56.3 million individuals who are above the age of 18. And these women are economically active, they're productive members of society, and the country is missing out on significant growth opportunities by not providing the right solutions for women. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation today in this particular podcast. Once again, the topic we're going to be discussing today is designing for her, gender intentional product design. Now, before we introduce our guest for today, the expert who is going to take us through what's involved, let's just bear in mind a few statistics. The first one I'd love to share is with regard to the micro enterprises in Nigeria. 41% are owned by women. And you would expect that with such a significant proportion, they would have access to the loans that they need to enable them to grow their businesses and employ more individuals. But that is not the case. Financial service providers are only giving 8% of their available loans to these economically active women micro-entrepreneurs. Here is another statistic, and this is with regard to financial literacy, understanding the financial solutions that are out there. 30% of Nigerian women are considered financially literate compared to 45% of men. So these are just a few data points that help us understand that women are disadvantaged when it comes to access to financial services, where they are located, and even understanding these financial services as well. We're going to go deeper into some of these data points as we progress, but now let me introduce you to our guest that is here with us. And doing justice to this conversation on gender intentional product design is none other than a seasoned financial inclusion advocate, practitioner, specialist with over a decade of experience within the financial industry, and also with regard to gender inclusion and market systems development, and a specialist when it comes to women-centered product innovation, not just in Nigeria, but across Sub-Saharan Africa. She has a very strong background in strategy design and implementation, and she works very closely with financial service providers who are the ones who interface with the last mile in ensuring that they are equipped with the right solutions that will empower low-income women. She is passionate about building resilient, gender-intentional financial ecosystems, and she has led impactful initiatives in Nigeria and even beyond Nigeria towards advancing women's economic empowerment and women's financial inclusion across providing access to finance, digital tools, and capacity building. She is no other than Miss Olajumoke Daramola, Specialist Advisory Services for Africa at Women's World Banking. You're welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Zeno. When you're reading my profile, I was wondering, are you sure that's me? But I'm glad that the work that we do for women, especially regards to product development and product design, is coming out strongly. And there is no better time for us to talk about this but now, where we have everyone listening and everybody willing to do their part. Thank you, Zido.
Great. It's so good to have you on this conversation, Jumoke. In fact, the organization you represent, Women's World Banking, has been at this for 45 years plus.
Yes, 45.
Yes, that's a long time. And that's why we're really interested in seeing the successes you have recorded, how you have interacted with partners, particularly how you've enabled them to come up with those products that are relevant for women micro-entrepreneurs, women in the different fields. So here's a quick question that just is going to set the tone for the rest of our conversation. Now, if you were able to set 3 priorities for Nigeria's financial ecosystem over the next 2 years towards improving women's access to meaningful financial services, what will those 3 priorities be?
I was going to say 3 priorities for advancing women's financial inclusion. I would say one thing first is us prioritizing gender disaggregated data across all financial service providers, because the data helps us to take the next steps. Then inclusive policies to ensure that women are not just backbenchers, but the policies include them to ensure that regulators, financial service providers, they also prioritize women in terms of not only products development, but also in the propositions that they put out there, and not looking at it as a corporate social responsibility, but a way to empower economically active women, like you rightly said in the beginning. The third one would also be for communities and advocacy groups to ensure that the women that we're trying to bring into the group are well aware of the products, propositions that are available to them, and they're able to uptake these products when due. And these are the 3 things I would prioritize.
Super. And I love the way these 3 different things are interconnected.
Definitely.
So you spoke about gender disaggregated data, because we can't even know the quantum of women who need the products and solutions we have if we cannot differentiate what proportion of the entire population they are within the banking portfolio. Then the policies, which speaks to the enabling environment.
Yes.
And I love what you said in relation to that providing solutions, providing products, providing enhanced processes and services for women is not CSR.
No, it's not.
So this is commercially viable.
Yes.
And for that commercial viability to be very clear to financial service providers who are listening to this podcast, who are watching us, is going to be very keen for us to look at the steps that need to be taken in the gender intentional product design itself.
Yes.
Then, of course, the third thing you mentioned, which we're going to touch on as we progress through the conversation, is around awareness.
Yes.
Awareness. Now, that is something you hear a lot of financial institutions talking about. But what exactly is the format or the approach for awareness that will really ensure that the last mile they get the information and they're motivated to use the solution? So we're going to go into that. But first of all, let's look at the steps for product design itself. What we have seen many institutions do is, like when we started the conversation today, we talked about those data points that make it very clear that there's a huge opportunity among women micro-entrepreneurs. So what some institutions have done is they've decided that, okay, let them set up a gender team. Let them look at the product being offered by another financial institution and just copy and paste. And let them look at an existing solution. So maybe it's a savings account, or maybe it's a credit solution, and let them pink wash it. Essentially, just branding it with the pink color and maybe adding to the naming convention something connected to women, and feel that that's all that needs to be done. So I would like you to share with our audience the various steps within the women-centered design methodology. What are the principles? What are the distinctions about it? And why would you say it is fundamental that that methodology is followed if you really want to have a solution or a product or a service that will be embraced by women?
Okay. I would like to mention that the women-centered design methodology is not just focusing on women. And at Women's World Banking, what makes the women-centered design thick or important is the fact that it enables you to provide commercially viable solutions. So from the onset, it is clear that what you're designing for is not for corporate social responsibility. It is a product that is going to be commercially viable. That being said, and I wanted to put it out center that, okay, so when we are saying design, it's not just for CSR. We're talking about commercially viable solutions. That being said, secondly, and this is how I start my conversations with financial service providers that I'm working with, the women group or the women as a group is not homogeneous. So the question is, even though you want to provide service for a woman, which woman? So you see during the women-centered design process, it's a 5-stage process. The first one, define. What does define mean? Clarity of the problem that you're trying to solve. What are you solving for? Who are you solving for? Is it the woman in the commercial area? Is it the woman in the rural area? These women, what do they do? When you look at their demography, what kind of person is she? We have to have that understanding before we then go to the next phase that we call diagnose.
All right. So before you go on to stage 2, this is really interesting, what you've said about the define phase.
Yes.
So if I were a financial service provider, maybe a microfinance bank or a fintech or an insurance company or a commercial bank or a non-interest bank, how would I go about define? Because I want to really understand the women, and I love what you said that it's not homogeneous.
No, it's not.
So thank you for helping the ecosystem take note of that.
Yeah.
All right. So could you just share more about how I can carry out the define?
Okay. So as an organization, you know what you want to achieve. I would say, for instance, now you want to create a savings product. But savings product for me, for instance, I'm a salaried woman. And savings product for the woman, I'm educated. Savings product for the woman that is not educated, that is in a rural area. Do you understand? The devices she uses, the who she listens to, who influences her ecosystem is different. So if you are creating a product for me as a person, it should be clear that I am your target segment. If you are creating for a different persona that I just explained now, that is the target segment. So I know it takes a lot of work to say, oh, okay, are you saying that for every woman we will create a different product? No, there will be similarities at some point. But the idea is clarity of mind, clarity of what you are solving for. And I'll let you know that currently what they do is, or what is common is, you create a solution, then you go and look for the problem. So you've created the product.
Yeah.
You are now more or less trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Oh, okay. Shebi is for women.
Yes.
It says. But we're not walking backwards. We walk forward. We walk towards the answer, not from the answer to the question, which is what the defined phase helps you to achieve, clarity. And it's not, as you go through all the process, it's very iterative. So it's not stuck on. You might start on this target segment, but I think based on the understanding you want, okay, this is where I want to go to. As you go forward, as we talk about the different phases, you will see that, oh, okay, there's clarity of mind. We might need to tweak. This is what I thought. This is what I thought I knew. What you think you know and what is what currently gives is different, or what happens on the market. Sometimes they may be the same thing. Sometimes they'll be different, which is what our women-centered design methodology helps you see. You iterate, you test. I know I was going through the first stage before going to the second. So by the second stage, that is where research comes in. We diagnose, understanding your target segment. What makes her tick? Who will she listen to? What is a day in her life like? Does she have kids? What's her age bracket? What does she do for a living? Who does she take advice from? What TV shows? Where does she get her information from?
Very interesting.
Very, very interesting. And by the time you start looking at this, you are building the persona of your intended segment. When you have that full understanding, you can then start with phase 3. Also, phase 2 also helps the organization in itself to know its capabilities. Based on what we're trying to do as an organization, is it in line, which is where our commercial viable solution comes to bear. It has to be in line with what your organization is trying to achieve. So your organization cannot be staying away from credit and you want to develop a credit product.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it has to be in line with your organizational objectives, your organizational aspirations. So matching those allows you to complete stage 2. Then we go to stage 3. You've gotten a lot of insights from stage 2. You know who you're designing for. You know the products you're trying to make. Then you go into the design phase where co-creation happens. Everybody comes together. We all huddle together thinking, how do we make this work? And co-creation is not a one-man job. There are different departments in the organization. Everybody comes in, looking at it from different angles, and everybody is able to say, okay, what should we do like this? And you come up with concepts, different prototypes. Then you then take to the market to check it. If I do this way, will you be interested in it? Do you see that every point in time, I'm going back to my target segment to confirm, to check?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, that it's not a rubber stamp process. It's not a straight through process that, okay, because this organization did this and it worked for them, we'll just copy and paste. Copy and paste will not work in WCD, no.
Great.
We have to be able to put in the work to be able to show results. So we'll do all this across design. Then we test it. We do user testing to check with a small group.
So just to take you back now, you've talked about define.
Yes.
And you mentioned diagnose
Yes.
as the second.
Yes.
And the third is the design.
Yes.
And you've said that from the design phase, you now progress to the testing.
No, testing is part of the design phase. Because, before you take it out there, you have to tweak it. So this product is not final yet. You're still making adjustments. So, okay, I'm going to go out like this. I'll take my simple design, nothing final yet. You go back to I'm asking them to even develop the product. It might be a prototype. You understand? You're going back to the market. If I make this product like this, are you going to be interested in it? So you're going back to seek validation. At the end of the design phase, you should have a prototype that has been vetted by your target segment. It is clear. Simple. Is that prototype you take to our next phase, which we call pilot. Now, pilot is you're not opening it out to the entire customer base yet, but a selected few.
Okay.
Let us see how it will work in a live environment. You deploy the product within your controlled live environment, so to say, and see how it is doing. After the pilot phase, you then take feedback again. Do you need to tweak anything? If there's anything to tweak, you tweak. Then that takes us to the final stage where we say you can then scale. All this is a lot of work. Then the question is, are the financial service providers ready to commit time, resources to ensure that they get it right?
That's a very good question. And I think that's something that the financial institutions would be asking themselves. And one of the questions related to that is to go through the 5 steps that you've mentioned.
Yes.
And could you just run through the 5 steps again?
Define, diagnose, design, pilot, and scale.
Excellent. Scale is where many institutions want to jump to immediately.
Yes.
Get those big numbers and, get that loyalty and patronage.
Yes.
But typically, with the proper investments for an institution that wants to follow this methodology, what kind of timelines should they bear in mind? Because for many institutions, of course, we want to ensure that there is value that is made available to shareholders, and we want to grow as institutions. But for us to have sustainability, which will come out of this process, what kind of timelines should they bear in mind? Should they feel that they can achieve introducing a new product after going through the 5 steps within 1 fiscal year,
Yes.
or within 6 months?
It's possible within 1 fiscal year. And some of these stages can be compressed depending on how in depth you want to go, how wide you want your research to be. And the good thing about it, which is where EFINA comes in, some of this research can be done on the desk. That is where reports like the A2F come into for help, because that way it gives you preliminary insights to know where you're going to find in the location that you're going to go. So that more or less cuts your research process by some time, circa 40 to 50%, and you're then able to go in deeper. I would say that, yes, within a year, very possible. But you would know that what you're getting is solid enough, and the customers that you bring on board would be of great value to the organization. They will stay in the organization longer than the copy and paste rubber stamps customer you'll have gotten initially.
Okay, great. And this is really helpful, so that from a planning perspective, organizations can know what kind of time commitments they will put behind following the 5-step women-centered design methodology. And I know that when you go through each of the stages, there is a lot of patience within each stage to thoroughly get all the information that you want.
Yes.
Now, I know that in the second step, which is diagnose, you mentioned research.
Yes.
And in your research, you're interacting with the last mile. And you mentioned that it's not just in the diagnose phase, but in other steps, you also go back to the last mile.
Yes.
You get them to ultimately vet the final solution as well.
Yes.
But in that diagnose phase, what barriers have you seen that are hindering women from getting the solutions that will enable their businesses to grow, that will give them resilience, that will enable them to look after their families as well? Because financial services, we're looking at not just savings and credit, but insurance, pensions, investments, remittances, payments. So, of course, the particular solution a financial institution decides to focus on would impact on the timeline for delivery. And there will be a unique set of barriers associated with these different solutions, although there will be commonalities. But with regard to commonalities, what kind of barriers have you seen?
Okay, so barriers, like you rightly said, barriers differ from product to product. So I'll touch on maybe when you're developing a savings product or when you're developing a credit product. So when it comes to barriers for savings product, one major issue is trust. Women, they need to trust. So if they don't trust the system, they can't come into the system. So that's one of the major barriers, that trust. Then another thing is time. They are time poor. So you'd see they need to take care of the family, they need to take care of their kids, they need to commitments to their communities. So we need to ensure that if you're then asking them to put their money somewhere, it has to be convenient. If she has to walk like 3 kilometers to drop her kids and pick them up, and she has another number of kilometers she needs to walk to go to the bank, in terms of priority, a family
Would come first.
Yes, they will come first. So we need to take into consideration time, convenience, and like I said, trust. And if you, when I was talking, who does she listen to in order to make decisions? There are some areas that are also plagued with socio-cultural issues. She doesn't even know that as a woman, she can put money aside. There are certain issues around that. So how do we get these women to trust us enough to want to put their money with a financial service provider? How do you get them to believe you to say that, oh, the bank is for them?
Those are very good questions.
Yes.
And those are questions that the financial service providers will be asking themselves. In fact, what you've said so far, I can summarize it as 3 T's.
Tell me.
So the 3 T's you've talked about are trust. You've also talked about time poverty.
Yes.
And the third one is traditions or norms. So those 3 that you've mentioned and you've observed while going through the diagnose phase, step 2 particularly,
Yes.
the research that you carry out, how have you been able to remedy those barriers? Because, you ended by talking about a question that financial institutions will have, that how do you deal with these barriers? How do you ensure that the women, despite these contextual limitations, they're still able to access formal financial services?
Yes.
So what would you say would be remedies in practice Women's World Banking has been able to find and that can be emulated by other institutions? So
I'm going to leverage or speak about one of the projects we did. And this was done in Nigeria. It was done with the Estuarial Diamond Bank. It was called Better. It was for the women in the market. They used agents. And those agents were called Better Friends. So they humanized the organization. So the bank is no longer a building, but someone that they can relate to, that they can speak to, someone they know within their ecosystem. Can you see how trust is then built? So this can be a bank officer that grew up in that neighborhood. They know him or know her.
Personal connection.
Personal connection. So they've put a face to the solution. That is where trust comes in. So if this person goes forward and says, oh, okay, do this solution with my bank. My bank is doing this. Is more familiar. That is able to come into the trust angle. Then time. I spoke about time poverty. Yeah. So these agents will go to meet them in Balogun Market at their stalls. We solved for time poverty.
Yes.
Then the other ones, traditions and norms, which is where I talked about social-cultural, is this person, you're speaking the same language. You'll be surprised. Breaking all this product solution in a way that they understand it. Oh, no. It's not, like they're saying they're not. It's not a RAM. It is clear. Oh, this is how they'll use your money. This is what is going to be done. So things along that line is how we're able to develop solutions. And this was as a result of the insights you got from the diagnose phase. This is coming together.
Yes.
Then you're solving for those insights by breaking those barriers and creating solutions to solve for the barriers highlighted.
And how did that particular solution you referenced, the Better product, how did that fare?
Yeah, at the time we launched the Better product with Estuarial Diamond Bank, it did very well. And you will see that the model of operation is similar to what plays out now with agents in the market, how agents is gaining tractions. They're moving forward, they're close to the people, they're instilling confidence in these women in the market. They're able to do more with the agents. Better agents or Better Friends, as they were called, was similar to that. And they were able to also make traction. We recorded growth across all metrics: account opening, account balance, even the customer lifetime value, because the customers were able to stay longer.
Okay.
In the system.
Perfect. I mean, this is something which is sustainable.
Yes, it is.
Following the women-centered design methodology. So, for our viewers and those who are with us on this podcast, that is a key takeaway for them, that you need to follow those 5 steps. Define, diagnose, design, roll out, pilot, and scale.
Yes.
Excellent.
Scale is also roll out.
Scale is rollout as well. So
Yes.
let's bear that in mind. You talked about the need for research in the diagnose phase.
Yeah.
And then in the design phase, I just want to ask one question on that. Then I have one other question related to data. But the question on the design phase is, who are the stakeholders? Because, within a financial service provider entity, within a financial institution, you have IT department, you have marketing and corporate communications, you have the product people, you have operations.
People.
Typically, for a project team that is going to go through the 5 steps, who would you say are the essential stakeholders at the minimum?
Okay, so like I said, it's a joint effort. When I say we are having a co-creation workshop, it's not just one team.
Great.
We have the product team, that's design and development. You have the business team. And when I say business team, the team that has both the relationship managers and sales managers, they have to have a representative because they're the ones on the field. Then customer service, customer care should have a rep.
Great.
Strategy should have a rep. Brand and comms should have a representative. Most importantly, IT and data, they need to be there because one of the fastest way to scale is through digital transformation. But it also has to be in line with your IT capabilities as an organization. So at the barest minimum, those people should
Be part of the project team.
Yes.
Excellent.
Constitute the project team.
Great.
And they should be committed. Commitment is key
Yes.
because everyone has a part to play. If not, by the time the solution is done, you struggle with buying.
Yes. Yes. That's a very good point that you mentioned about the need for there to be commitment, and that cuts across the whole institution, doesn't it? Yes, all the way from the C-suite, the executive floor, through to those in the project team. You mentioned data, and I had also mentioned that, yes, we'll talk a bit about data. What role would you say having gender disaggregated data has in coming up with the right solution for women?
Okay, there is an analogy I usually use that without data, it's like you're going to war with one hand behind your back. So everybody's fighting with 2 hands, you're fighting with just one. Gender disaggregated data helps the organizations to make informed decisions. So you know what is lacking, you know where it is lacking. If you know the number of men you have in your books and the number of women, total number of accounts is no longer total number of accounts. You're able to say directly that of my portfolio, 70% are men, 30% are women. Of the amount saved, this gender accounts for this percentage. There's a general saying that women are better borrowers and they repay their loans better. Gender disaggregated data would show. And you then know, in terms of next steps, where do I go? If I'm making most of my money from this gender, if this gender gives me more value for money, I will channel more services to them. And my return on investment will be better. Yeah, then even for the regulators, they're able to make more informed policies, more inclusive policies, because the data is clear.
Yes.
The channels you use to engage them is clear because you already have that data. So the need for gender disaggregated data can't be overemphasized. It is required, it is important, and it is crucial for informed decision making.
Great, excellent. It's important, it is crucial for decision making, and it's very, very vital for having the right products designed for women. Yeah. We've really covered a lot in this conversation. I wish we had a whole lot more time, and we definitely would love to have you back for another episode with the EFINA podcast. But we wanted to really leverage your presence to highlight in very clear terms to the entire ecosystem who are watching this podcast the clear steps that are involved in following through on the women-centered design methodology, because people are talking about it. People have come up with different products and solutions, but if you want to get it right, follow the process. And we have national targets in the country when it comes to financial inclusion for women. Mm-hmm. And we want to ensure we achieve those targets by following the right steps. We've also been able to share with our audience the timelines to bear in mind. We've shared with them as well the importance of data, the importance of awareness, the importance of having a project team with the right stakeholders involved, because it's everyone in the organization pulling together and moving forward together and implementing a solution for women, centered around the women, not a copy and paste, not a bandwagon approach that others are doing it, so we're going to do likewise. And one point which you mentioned, is commitment.
Yes.
So if you want that initiative to survive the project and be sustainable and have a life of its own, the importance of ensuring from the C-suite, from the CEO through to management to the project team, everybody is involved in carrying out this implementation. It's been a very fine conversation so far, Jumoke. So in closing, and as you look into the future, what do you need from financial service providers and also regulators? What would you tell them and development partners with regard to mainstreaming gender intentional product design across Nigeria and SSA? What practical things would you give us a call out to them?
Okay, thank you, Zeno. For financial service providers, I would say that designing for women has to be bespoke to their needs. They should take into consideration the peculiarity of the women's needs. Because if there are no use cases for the woman when the product is being developed, then it is, for lack of better word, I would say dead on arrival. Then for regulators, the need for gender disaggregated data, inclusive policies cannot be overemphasized. And for them to mandate financial service providers to provide this data, there has to be incentives. What is the need for them? So I think that is something regulators should look into. Inclusive policies and mandating submission and reporting of gender disaggregated data and making it worthwhile for the financial service provider. Then for the development finance institutions, we cannot say this enough. This particular segment needs funding. And for funding and for the change we need to occur, we need funds to do it. So we should keep looking into this segment and partnering with organizations like us and EFINA to move the needle. So we go from not just access, but usage of financial services. Thank you, Zeno.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jumoke. We're so delighted to have you on this particular podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from the expert. And this is what we do at the EFINA podcast. We bring the experts, the practitioners, those rolling up their sleeves to come and share their stories, to also share insights, things that are practical that we can utilize. And we encourage you to start utilizing the women-centered design methodology now and continue to put it to use so that we can see a closure of the gender gap and we can see advancement and access to beneficial financial services, solutions, processes. And these would be embraced by others, and that will lead to overall prosperity. Once again, it's Zeno Afigbe of the Gender Center of Excellence of EFINA, Enhancing Financial Inclusion and Advancement. This was episode 7, Designing for Her, gender intentional design, and we look forward to welcoming you to the next episode. Bye for now.
The EFINA Podcast.